no worse. And still no sound, no movement. I got up on my feet, bent over, squinting, and edged back through the trees toward the town. It followed me, whatever it was. I was as sure of that as I'd ever been of anything. And then, in one instant, as if it had all been my mind, the thing was gone. In the hall, they were laughing. Men and women stood talking in the light of the mead hall door and on the narrow streets below. On the lower hillside, boys and girls played near the sheep pens, shyly holding hands. The few lay touching each other in the forest eaves. I thought how they'd shriek if I suddenly showed my face, and it made me smile. But I held myself back. They talked nothing. Stupidities. Their soft voices groping like hands. I felt myself tightening, cross, growing restless for no clear reason, and I made myself move more slowly. Then, circling the clearing, I stepped on something fleshy and jerked away. It was a man. They'd cut his throat. His clothes had been stolen. I stared up at the hall, baffled, beginning to shake. They went on talking softly, touching hands, their hair full of light. I lifted up the body and slung it across my shoulder. Then the harp began to play. The crowd grew still. The harp sighed. The old man sang, as sweet-voiced as a child. He told how the earth was first built long ago, said that the greatest of gods made the world, every wonder-bright plain and the turning seas, and set out as signs of his victory the sun and moon, great lamps for light to land-dwellers, kingdom torches, and adorned the fields with all colors and shapes, made limbs and leaves, and gave life to the every creature that moves on land. The harp turned solemn. He told of an ancient feud between two brothers, which split all the world between darkness and light. And I, Grendel, was the dark side, he said in effect, the terrible race God cursed. I believed him. Such was the power of the shaper's harp. Stood wriggling my face, letting tears down my nose, grinding my fists into my streaming eyes, even though to do it I had to squeeze with my elbow the corpse of the proof that both of us were cursed, or neither, that the brothers had never lived, nor the God who judged them. Wah! I bawled. Oh, what a conversion! I staggered out into the open and up toward the hall with my burden, groaning out, "Mercy! Peace!" The harper broke off. The people screamed. They have their own versions, but this is the truth. Drunken men rushed me with battle-axes. I sank to my knees, crying, "Friend! Friend!" They hacked at me, yipping like dogs. I held up the body for protection. Their spears came through it, and one of them nicked me, a tiny scratch high on my left breast, but I knew by the sting it had venom on it, and I understood, as shocked as I'd been the first time, that they could kill me, eventually would if I gave them a chance. I struck at them, holding the body as a shield, and two fell bleeding from my nails at the first little swipe. The others backed off. I crushed the body in my hug, then hurled it in their faces, turned and fled. They didn't follow. I ran to the center of the forest and fell down panting. My mind was wild. "Pity," I moaned. "Oh, pity, pity," I wept. Strong monster with teeth like a shark's. And I slammed the earth with such force that a seam split open 12 feet long. "Bastards," I roared. "Sons of bitches, fuckers," words I'd picked up from men in their rages. I wasn't even sure what they meant, though I had an idea. Defiance, rejection of the gods that, for my part, I'd known all along to be lifeless sticks. I roared with laughter, still sobbing. We, the accursed, didn't even have words for swearing in. "Ugh!" I whooped, then covered my ears and hushed. It sounded silly. My sudden awareness of my foolishness made me calm. I looked up through the treetops, ludicrously hopeful. I think I was half prepared in my dark, demented state to see God, bearded and grey as geometry, scowling down at me, shaking his bloodless finger. "Why can't I have someone to talk to?" I said. The stars said nothing, but I pretended to ignore the rudeness. "The Shaper has people to talk to," I said. I wrung my fingers. "Hrothgar has people to talk to." I thought about it. Perhaps it wasn't true. As a matter of fact, if the Shaper's vision of goodness and peace was a part of himself, not idle rhymes, then no one understood him at all, not even Hrothgar. And as for Hrothgar, if he was serious about his idea of glory, sons and sons' sons giving out treasure, I had news for him. If he had sons, they wouldn't hear his words. They would weigh his silver and gold in their minds. I've watched the generations. I've seen their weasel eyes. I fought down my smile. "That could change," I said, shaking my finger as if at an audience. "The Shaper may yet improve men's minds, bring peace to the miserable Danes." But they were doomed, I knew, and I was glad, no denying it. Let them wander the fog roads of hell. 2 nights later, I went back. I was addicted. The Shaper was singing the glorious deeds of the dead men, praising war. He sang how they'd fought me. It was all lies. The sly harp rasped like snakes in cattails, glorifying death. I snatched a guard and smashed him on a tree, but my stomach turned at the thought of eating him. "Woe to the man," the Shaper sang, "who shall through wicked hostilities shove his soul down into the fire's hug. Let him hope for no change, he can never turn away. But lucky the man who, after his death day, shall seek the prince, find peace in his father's embrace." "Bullshit," I whispered through clenched teeth. How was it that he could enrage me so? "Why not?" the darkness hissed around me. "Why not? Why not?" Teasing, tormenting, as cold as a dead hand closing on my wrist. Imagination, I knew. Some evil inside myself pushed out into the trees. I knew what I knew. The mindless, mechanical bruteness of things. And when the harper's lure drew my mind away to hopeful dreams, the dark of what was and always was reached out and snatched my feet. And yet I'd be surprised, I had to admit, if anything in myself could be as cold, as dark, as centuries old as the presence I felt around me. I touched a vine to reassure myself. It was a snake. I snapped back in terror. Then I calmed myself again. The fangs hadn't hit. It came to me that the presence was still there, somewhere deeper, much deeper in the night. I had a feeling that if I let myself I could fall toward it, that it was pulling me, pulling the whole world in like a whirlpool. Craziness, of course. I got up, though the feeling was as strong as ever, and felt my way back through the forest and over to the cliff wall, and back to the mere and to my cave. I lay there listening to the indistinct memory of the Shaper's songs. My mother picked through the bone pile, sullen. I'd brought no food. "Ridiculous," I whispered. She looked at me. It was a cold-blooded lie that a god had lovingly made the world and set out the sun and moon as lights to land-dwellers, that brothers had fought, that one of the races was saved, the other cursed. Yet he, the old Shaper, might make it true by the sweetness of his harp, his cunning trickery. It came to me with a fierce jolt that I wanted it, as they did too, though vicious animals, cunning, cracked with theories. I wanted it, yes, even if I must be the outcast, cursed by the rules of his hideous fable. She whimpered, scratched at the nipple I had not sucked in years. She was pitiful, foul, her smile a jagged white tear in the firelight. Waste. She whimpered one sound, "Dul-dul, dul-dul," scratching at her bosom, a ghastly attempt to climb back up to speech. I clamped my eyes shut, listened to the river, and after a time I slept. I sat up with a jerk. The thing was all around me now, like a thunder charge. "Who is it?" I said. No answer. Darkness. My mother was asleep. She was as dead-looking as a red-grey old sea-elephant stretched on the shore of a summer day. I got up and silently left the cave. I went to the cliff wall, then down to the moor. Still nothing. I made my mind a blank, and fell, sank away like a stone through earth and sea, toward the dragon. Chapter 5. No use of a growl, a whoop, a roar in the presence of that beast. Vast, red-golden, huge tail coiled, limbs sprawled over his treasure hoard, eyes not fiery but cold as the memory of family deaths. Vanishing away across invisible floors, there were things of gold, gems, jewels, silver vessels the color of blood in the undulant, dragon-red light. Arching above him, the ceiling and upper walls of his cave were alive with bats. The color of his sharp scales darkened and brightened as the dragon inhaled and exhaled slowly, drawing new air across his vast internal furnace. His razor-sharp tusks gleamed and glinted as if they, too, like the mountain beneath him, were formed of precious stones and metals. My heart shook. His eyes stared straight at me. My knees and insides were so weak I had to drop down on all fours. His mouth opened slightly. Bits of flame escaped. "Ah, Grendel," he said, "you've come." The voice was startling, no rolling boom as I would have expected, but a voice that might have come from an old man. Louder, of course, but not much louder.
"We've been expecting you," he said.
He gave a nervous laugh, like a miser caught at his counting. His eyes were heavy-lidded, minutely veined, wrinkled like an elderly mead drinker's.
"Stand around the side, if you don't mind, boy," he said. "I get a cough sometimes, and it's terrible straight out front."
The high, dead eyelids wrinkled more. The corners of his mouth snaked up as he chuckled, sly, hardly hiding his malice. I quickly ducked around to the side.
"Good boy,"
he said. He tipped his head, lowering an eye toward me.
"Smart boy. He, he, he."
He lifted a wrinkled paw with man-length talons for nails, and held it over my head as if to crush me with it, but he merely brought it down lightly, once, twice, 3 times, patting my head.
"Well, speak, boy," he said. "Say hello there, Mr. Dragon."
He cackled. My throat convulsed, and I tried to get my breath to speak, but I couldn't. The dragon smiled. Horrible, debauched, mouth limp and cracked, loose against the teeth as an ancient dog's.
"Now you know how they feel when they see you, eh? Scared enough to pee in their pants. Hee hee."
He looked startled by an unpleasant thought, then cross. "You didn't, did you?" I shook my head.
"Good," he said. "That's valuable stuff you're standing on. Boobies, hemorrhoids, boils, slaver, nyeh. Now."
He moved his head as if adjusting his flaking neck to a tight metal collar, and put on what looked like, for him, a sober expression, like an old drunk preparing a solemn face for court. Then, as if involuntarily, he cackled again. It was horrible, horrible, obscene. He couldn't stop himself. He cackled so hard a brilliant tear like a giant diamond rolled down his cheek. And still he couldn't stop. He raised up the taloned paw and pointed at me. His head tipped back, laughing, blowing fire out his mouth and nostrils. He tried to say something, but the laughing got worse. He rolled over on his side, stretching up one vast, wrinkled wing for balance, covering his eyes with one claw, still pointing with the other, roaring with laughter, and kicking a little with his 2 back feet. I felt cross all at once, though I didn't dare show it.
"Like a rabbit," he brought out. "Nyeh, hee, hee. When you're scared, you look nyeh, hee, hee. Exactly.
I scowled, and, realizing I had my hands out in front of me, like a rabbit sitting up, I jerked them behind my back. My scowl of rage nearly finished him. He hooted, gasped, sobbed, began to choke with laughter. I forgot myself completely. I snatched up an emerald the size of a fist and pulled it back to throw it at him. He was sober instantly.
"Put it down," he said.
He drew in breath and turned his huge head straight at me. I dropped it and fought to keep my bowels from moving down.
"Don't touch," he said.
The old man's voice was as terrible now as the eyes. It was as if he'd been dead for 1,000 years.
"Never, never, never touch my things," he said.
Flame came out with the words and singed the hair on my belly and legs. I nodded, trembling all over.
"Good,"
he said. He stared at me a moment longer, then slowly turned his head away. Then, old womanish, as if he were, though still spiteful, slightly embarrassed. He got back up onto his treasure pile, stretched out his wings, and settled. He was in the foulest of moods. I doubted that I could learn anything from him now. I'd be lucky to get away alive. I thought all at once about what he'd said. Now you know how they feel when they see you. He had a point. From now on I'd stay clear of them. It was one thing to eat one from time to time. That was only natural. Kept them from overpopulating, maybe starving to death come winter. But it was another thing to scare them, give them heart attacks, fill their nights with nightmares just for sport.
"Fiddlesticks," the dragon said.
I blinked.
"Fiddlesticks, that's what I said," he repeated. "Why not frighten them? Creature, I could tell you things."
He rolled his eyes up under the heavy lids and made a noise. Glarr! He remained that way, breathing hard with peevish anger.
"Stupid, stupid, stupid," he hissed. "The whole damned kit and caboodle. Why did you come here? Why do you bother me? Don't answer," he added quickly, stopping me. "I know what's in your mind. I know everything. That's what makes me so sick and old and tired."
"I'm sorry," I said.
"Be still,"
he screamed. Flame shot clear to the cave mouth.
"I know you're sorry, for right now, that is, for this one frail, foolish flicker-flash in the long, dull fall of eternity. I'm unimpressed. No, be still." His eye burst open like a hole to hush me. I closed my mouth. The eye was terrible, lowering toward me. I felt as if I were tumbling down into it, dropping endlessly down through a soundless void. He let me fall, down and down toward a black sun and spiders, though he knew I was beginning to die. Nothing could have been more disinterested. Serpent to the core. But then he spoke after all, or rather laughed, and reality snapped back. Laughed, spoke, and broke my fall, not as a kindness to me, but because of his cold pleasure in knowing what he knew. I was in the cave again, and his horrible smile was snaking up his wrinkled cheek, and his eye was once more half closed. "You want the word," he said. "That's what you've come for. My advice is, don't ask. Do as I do. Seek out gold, but not my gold, and guard it."
"Why?" I said.
"Be still!"
The cave went white with his fire, and the rock walls roared the echo back. Bats flew like dust in a granary, then returned to their places, a few at a time, until all was still again, motionless, as if lifeless. His wings, which had stretched out slightly, relaxed and settled. I waited for what seemed hours, huddling, my fingers protecting my head. Then,
"You want to know about the Shaper?"
I nodded.
"Illusion,"
he said. He half smiled, then let it go as if infinitely weary, sick of time.
"I know everything, you see," the old voice wheedled. "The beginning, the present, the end. Everything. You now, you see the past and the present, like other low creatures. No higher faculties than memory and perception. But dragons, my boy, have a whole different kind of mind."
He stretched his mouth in a kind of smile, no trace of pleasure in it.
"We see from the mountain top all time, all space. We see in one instant the passionate vision and the blowout. Not that we cause things to fail, you understand."
He was testy all at once, as if answering an argument that had been put to him so often he was sick of it.
"Dragons don't mess with your piddling free will. Pah! Listen to me, boy." The dead eye brightened. "If you, with your knowledge of present and past, recall that a certain man slipped on, say, a banana peel, or fell off his chair, or drowned in a river, that recollection does not mean that you caused him to slip, or fall, or drown, correct? Of course it's correct. It happened and you know it. But knowledge is not cause. Of course, anyone who argues otherwise is a stupid ignoramus. Well, so with me. My knowledge of the future does not cause the future, it merely sees it, exactly as creatures at your low level recall things past. And even if, say, I interfere, burn up somebody's mead hall, for instance, whether because I just feel like it or because some supplicant asked me to, even then I do not change the future. I merely do what I saw from the beginning. That's obvious, surely. Let's say it's settled, then. So much for free will and intercession."
The dragon's eye closed to a slit.
"Grendel!" I jumped. "Don't look so bored," he said.
He scowled, black as midnight.
"Think how I must feel," he said.
I almost said, "I'm sorry," but caught myself.
"Man,"
he said, then left a long pause, letting scorn build up in the cave like the venom in his breath. "I can see you understand them. Counters, measurers, theory makers. All pigs eat cheese. Old Snaggle is a pig. If Snaggle is sick and refuses to eat, try cheese. Games, games, games!" He snorted fire. "They only think they think. No total vision, total system. Merely schemes with a vague family resemblance. No more identity than bridges and, say, spiderwebs. But they rush across chasms on spiderwebs, and sometimes they make it, and that, they think, settles that. I could tell you 1,000 tiresome stories of their absurdity. They'd map out roads through hell with their crackpot theories, their here to the moon and back lists of paltry facts. Insanity. The simplest insanity ever devised. Simple facts in isolation, and facts to connect them, ands and buts, are the sine qua non of all their glorious achievement. But there are no such facts. Connectedness is the essence of everything. It doesn't stop them, of course. They build the whole world out of teeth deprived of bodies to chew or be chewed on. They sense that, of course, from time to time. Have uneasy feelings that all they live by is nonsense.
They have dim apprehensions that such propositions as God does not exist are somewhat dubious, at least in comparison with statements like all carnivorous cows eat meat. That's where the Shaper saves them, provides an illusion of reality, puts together all their facts with a gluey wine of connectedness. Mere tripe, believe me, mere sleight of wits. He knows no more than they do about total reality, less, if anything. Works with the same old clutter of atoms, the givens of his time and place and tongue. But he spins it all together with harp runs and hoots, and they think what they think is alive, think heaven loves them. It keeps them going, for what that's worth. As for myself, I can hardly bear to look. I see, I said. It was to some extent untrue. The dragon smiled, seemed almost friendly for an instant. "You've been very attentive and thoughtful," he said, "all things considered. So I will tell you about time and space." "Thank you," I said, as heartily as I could manage. I had more than enough to think about, it seemed to me. He scowled, and I said no more. He took a deep breath, shifted his forelegs to a position more comfortable, and after a moment's thought, began. "In all discussions of nature, we must try to remember the differences of scale, and in particular the differences of time span. We, by which I mean you, not us, are apt to take modes of observable functioning in our own bodies as setting an absolute scale. But as a matter of fact, it's extremely rash to extend conclusions derived from observation far beyond the scale of magnitude to which the observation was confined. For example, the apparent absence of change within a second of time tells nothing as to the change within 1,000 years. Also, no appearance of change within 1,000 years tells anything concerning what might happen in, say, 1,000,000 years. And no apparent change within 1,000,000 years tells anything about 1,000,000,000,000 years. We can extend this progression indefinitely. There is no absolute standard of magnitude. Any term in this progression is large compared to its predecessor, and small compared to its successor. Again, all special studies presuppose certain fundamental types of things. Here I am using the word thing, notice, in its most general sense, which can include activities, colors, and all other sensa, also values. As lower minds function, study, or science, is concerned with a limited set of various types of things. There is thus, in the first place, this variety of types. In the second place, there is the determination as to what types are exhibited in any indicated situation. For example, there is the singular proposition, "This is green," and there is the more general proposition, "All those things are green." This type of inquiry is what your usual reasoning takes care of. Undoubtedly, such inquiries are essential in the initial stage of any study for lower minds. But every such study must strive to get beyond it. Unfortunately, he glanced at me suspicious. "You're not paying attention." "I am," I said, clasping my hands to show my seriousness. But he shook his head slowly. "Nothing interests you but excitement, violence." "That's not true," I said. His eye opened wider. His body brightened from end to end. "You tell me what's true?" he said. "I'm trying to follow. I do my best," I said. "You should be reasonable. What do you expect?" The dragon thought about it, breathing slowly, full of wrath. At last he closed his eyes. "Let us try starting somewhere else," he said. "It's damned hard, you understand, confining myself to concepts familiar to a creature of the Dark Ages. Not that one age is darker than another. Technical jargon from another dark age." He scowled, as if hardly capable of forcing himself on. Then, after a long moment, "The essence of life is to be found in the frustrations of established order. The universe refuses the deadening influence of complete conformity. And yet in its refusal, it passes toward novel order as a primary requisite for important experience. We have to explain the aim at forms of order, and the aim at novelty of order, and the measure of success and the measure of failure. Apart from some understanding, however dim-witted, of these characteristics of historic process—" His voice trailed off. After another long pause, he said, "Approach it this way. Let us take this jug." He picked up a golden vessel and held it toward me, not letting me touch it. In spite of himself, as it seemed, he looked hostile and suspicious, as if he thought I might perhaps be so stupid as to snatch the thing and run. "How does this jug differ from something animate?" He drew it back out of reach. "By organization, exactly. This jug is an absolute democracy of atoms. It has importance, or there-ness, so to speak, but no expression, or, loosely, aha-ness. Importance is primarily monistic in its reference to the universe. Limited to a finite individual occasion, importance ceases to be important. In some sense or other, we can skip the details, importance is derived from the immanence of infinitude in the finite. Expression, however, listen closely now, expression is founded on the finite occasion. It is the activity of finitude impressing itself on its environment. Importance passes from the world as one to the world as many, whereas expression is the gift from the world as many to the world as one. The laws of nature are large, average effects which reign impersonally. But there is nothing average about expression. It is essentially individual. Consider one definite molecule. "A what?" I said. The closed eyes squeezed tight. He let out a long, cross sigh of red-orange fire. "Put it this way," he said. His voice had grown feeble, as if he were losing hope. "In the case of vegetables, we find expressive bodily organizations
which lack any one center of experience with a higher complexity either of expressions received or of inborn data. Another democracy, but with qualifications, as we shall see. An animal, on the other hand, is dominated by one or more centers of experience. If the dominant activity be severed from the rest of the body, if, for example, we cut off the head, the whole coordination collapses and the animal dies, whereas in the case of the vegetable, the democracy can be subdivided into minor democracies which easily survive without much apparent loss of functional expression. He paused. You at least follow that? I think so. He sighed. Listen. Listen closely. An angry man does not usually shake his fist at the universe in general. He makes a selection and knocks his neighbor down. A piece of rock, on the other hand, impartially attracts the universe according to the law of gravitation. You grant there's a difference? He waited, furious with impatience. I met his eye as long as I could, then shook my head. It was unfair. For all I knew, he might be telling me gibberish on purpose. I sat down. Let him babble. Let him burn me alive. The hell with it. After a long, long time, he said, It was stupid of you to come. I nodded, sulking. He stretched his wings. It was like a huge, irascible yawn, then settled again. Things come and go, he said. That's the gist of it. In a billion years, everything will have come and gone several times, in various forms. Even I will be gone. A certain man will absurdly kill me. A terrible pity. Loss of a remarkable form of life. Conservationists will howl. He chuckled. Meaningless, however. These jugs and pebbles, everything, these too, will go. Poof! Boobies, hemorrhoids, boils, slaver. You don't know that, I said. He smiled, showing all his teeth. And I knew he knew it. A swirl in the stream of time. A temporary gathering of bits. A few random dust specks, so to speak, pure metaphor, you understand. Then, by chance, a vast floating cloud of dust specks, an expanding universe. He shrugged. Complexities. Green dust as well as the regular kind. Purple dust. Gold. Additional refinements. Sensitive dust, copulating dust, worshipful dust. He laughed, hollow as the cavern around him. New laws for each new form, of course. New lines of potential. Complexity beyond complexity. Accident on accident. Until...